More millionaires are migrating than ever. Shall we tell our spectators what are we looking at? It's a graph in money moves.
I'll show them in the video.
I
Yeah.
see.
But this is what I got from the news. I think it's WSJ, Wall Street Journal. I think last week they had a report on this basically.
Let's start with economics, because we see that United Arab Emirates are on top, and we see that the United Kingdoms are at the bottom. Means that people moving from United Kingdom to United Arab Emirates.
Yeah, correct.
So they are going from China, from India, from South Korea, and from Russia to United Arab Emirates, United States of America, Italy, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia in that order.
Yeah.
Which is telling, first of all, me that it's probably regulatory and tax regime in Europe or United Kingdom in particular starts not to be complementary to the goals and objectives of the people with large capital holding. That's what usually happens when you try to squeeze another couple of billions of dollars from the people who are the most productive part of your society. Because of course there is a different views on how and why someone become a millionaire. And there are, of course, the large class and growing class of the millionaires which become the millionaires because of their heritage, not because of their work or their genius input to the art or to the science or to the sport. However, according to the statistics, most of the millionaires, like predominantly, overwhelmingly, almost more than 80%, all the millionaires, they are self-made.
How many? 80%, you say?
I would not allow you to hold me to my to my words, but that number must be about 80%. Maybe maybe a little less, because now we have a growing number of the millennials who start to inherit the wealth of their fathers, boomers. So that might be that number now a little bit less than 80%. But it's pretty logical, because past 20 to 30, even to maybe 35 years was unprecedented in the history of the economics and of the business, because so many opportunities were opening left and right for the people of my generation and a little bit more older than your generation. With all the international markets being available, with new technologies springing left and right, and that's allow people to create literally millions of businesses. And of course, the consequences of that more and more people, if I'm not mistaken, more than 70,000 millionaires are all over the world, or multimillionaires. Because millionaires, it's if you own the house which market price is now $1 million. Are you or are you not millionaire? What do you think?
I think I am a millionaire, if that's the case.
Well, according to the definition of the millionaire in the United States, you are not, because you need to have liquid assets.
Cash, basically.
Basically, not necessarily. It might be stocks as well.
Stocks, okay.
Yeah. Liquid assets for more than $1 million. And you have to be able to prove that. So your car, your home, and your land is not included.
Not included.
Yeah, it's not. But it is according to the United States.
So you're saying this graph, the millionaire over here, means that literally they have like liquid assets in terms of millionaire?
I suppose so, because most of the journals and statistical agencies, they are using the same kind of framework or approach when they publish their information. So I assume again that they also, which is not surprising, the Chinese millionaires are moving somewhere, which is about 8,000 of them are migrated during 2025, as I see from here. And you know that China start to be a little bit more or less friendlier for people with money, because of the change of the direction from being largely orientated to the capitalist way of development to a little bit changing direction. There are maybe different reasons for that, but the trend is obvious. And people reacting, trying to withdraw their assets from China. You want to ask me?
Yes, because I understand, like, for people in China, because there's obvious reasons, right, that millionaires are going out of China. But why is UK on the list? And why is the number so high right now? What's
Well,
happening there?
I think that United Kingdom is especially hit because of the Brexit. That's probably one of the reasons which led to drastic reduction of international business there, which now put many businesses in drastic reduction of registration of international business. United Kingdom, which put now many entrepreneurs in a difficult situation. They need to get to the visa. They need to they need now to follow all of this European regulatory framework, which now become external for them. And additionally, I think which does not help is the direction the government of United Kingdom politics to more like socially minded governance, which is of course nothing surprising or bad about that. But when your profession is managing money or owning money or investing, it's not always you become excited about that, because again, it reflects on taxes, it reflects on how people look at you, how people talk to you, and all of that. So that might be the reason. Then we have India, which is maybe related to overall situation in the region, because as Chinese economies start to go down, Indian economy is very much linked to the regional state of the economy, and people try maybe safeguard their money. Maybe it also reflection of the political situation, all these conflicts which are going on between maybe two countries, maybe within India. Then we have South Korea, which is may be linked to the tension in the regions also, because all this region is now, sometimes people saying, oh, this region in the verge of the next conflict. Maybe that reflects in South Korea, and such a conflict will be in the least enviable situation. Also, of course, it's economics, because Chinese rate of growth now slowed drastically. It used to be about average at 6 to 8% per year, which even reaching almost 10, which is one of the fastest growth of rate of growth in economic history. And China was able to maintain this growth for several years in a row, for more than several, for almost a decade in a row, which created absolutely new class of millionaires, by the way. But now, when China start to scale down in many directions, in economic side, in regulatory side, in internal political freedom kind of thing side, that actually reflects on neighboring states, and South Korea is one of the examples. Although we can, and by the way, it also reflects in other countries, but we need to take into account that South Korea, India, and China contains one of the highest number of millionaires, just by the percentage of the population. Yeah. That's why we see that figures here, and we don't see other countries here. And then, of course, Russia. I don't think I need to comment about that. Everyone knows the situation.
But it's the lowest on the list, though. Because everybody knows what's happening in Russia right now, right?
Well, it's true, but it's lowest in the list because the least amount of millionaires is in Russia.
Oh, you are saying that
compared to the rest of the world, and in percentage of the population. But still, Russia stands very high in the number of millionaires and billionaires compared to the other countries. So it's a least percentage of population, but still it's high enough to be in the list.
So you are saying UK being on the top of the list is not only because of the current situation in UK, but also because UK has a lot of billionaires and millionaires, right?
That's absolutely true. Yes, and so many people were moving to United Kingdom long during the post 1990s, because United Kingdom at that time was probably one of the friendliest places in whole planet to accept people with a capital. There were
Sorry, when's that again?
it was after the in 1990s,
1990s.
starting with the collapse of the Berlin Wall. United Kingdom became one of the most friendliest place for people with large assets, holdings to move. Yes, that because it was a very long time. It had been the policy of the United Kingdom to attract very wealthy people, and that was actually not only in 20th century or 21st century. It was also before in the 19th century and in the 18th century, when the European millionaires of those years were flying. They were flying largely to Britain. You can remember, for example, the fate or the history of Jolou, who flew from France when he was pursued by people who was discontent with him building a pyramid type of first pyramid in the world. In fact, in Louisiana, it was it was a Louisiana purchase, and at that time, he basically used that to build a large personal fortune on top of that. But it's a different story. We can talk about that different time. And if you look further, you can see that there are places where capital is going to. It's Saudi Arabia, again, it's United Arab Kingdom, Arab Emirates, United States, Italy, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia. Of course, being United States of America, I don't think you need to be surprised that capital still going here. Although I might say that I would not expect the United States to be in its second place. I would probably expect it to be on the third place.
Oh, really? The third place?
Yes. It is on its second place because of the large number of people coming here. But usually, United States is in the first place. It would be like number one.
That's what
number one spot for people. But I think United Arab Emirates took the precedent or took over with more than 2,000 people because of the Eastern European immigrants. If you see, there are more than 4.5 thousand millionaires living in Russia, and at least half of them moved to United Arab Emirates because it's very close, very friendly, and good climate. So that's why probably these people from Russia made push United Arab Emirates on top of United States. But traditionally, United States, of course, provide the most capital-friendly regulatory environment.
I want to go back a little bit into history because you just mentioned that UK having the policy of welcoming rich people previously in history, right? So I guess I'm interested in, because you also mentioned that the reason why rich people are moving to a specific place is because of either tax or regulation reasons. So since when in the history of humankind does rich people start migrating to a different country? And like, what's the background story during then?
Well, that can take a long time to elaborate on that, because it requires me to start explaining or talking about the history of the wealth. So since the humans start to be aware of the I can say they invent the way to accumulate wealth, then probably we can trace the history of the very wealthy people. And it might be the people sitting in a cage, sorry, in a cage, people sitting in a cave at that time, and they were accumulating a lot of, for example,
Coins?
not coins. At that time, it was. We will come later to that. It's arrows. So one of the first currency known to humanity was these stone arrows. It was not arrow because there is a shaft of the arrow, and there is an arrow itself. and it's very difficult to manufacture. And in order to be able to do that, you need to spend a lot of man hours. And then that's by itself start to be the medium of exchange, because it's small, you can keep it and you can collect it. It can lay somewhere behind your, I don't know, it's not it's behind what you bag in your cave, and then you can use it anytime.
Yeah.
And anyone else can use it as well. So it's very universal. You can go to the other tribe, it's also use arrows. So, and it's actually historical fact.
Yeah.
Because they still found a lot of arrows piles
I
where,
want to search for it because you mentioned that.
yeah,
So what should I search? Just arrows as like currency?
yeah. Of course, it's all speculatory, because we didn't have accounting books until probably the Mesopotamia, when most of the records left from the Mesopotamian civilization is actually accounting books, recording from whom. That's actually much later.
Much later?
Yes, I'm talking about the arrows made from the stone.
Ah.
Yes, flint arrows, they call
Flint
it.
arrows.
Flint arrow, yeah. Flint arrow, very difficult to manufacture, because flints, that's exactly what it is. Flints are very fragile material. And if you try it by yourself, it's not going to work. So you need to have a good, very high level of this, very, very, you got to have skills to do that. So that's actually added to the price of the arrowhead. But from exchanging arrowheads, people pretty much moved very, very fast to, as you mentioned, for example, to shells or to rare stones. And it's actually, again, according to archaeological research, it's obvious that, for example, if you go to the mountains, where there are a lot of stones, in the mountains, what you're going to use for your as a money is something you cannot find in the mountains. In the mountains, you got a lot of minerals. So using stones or precious stones in the mountains much less widespread than shells, because shells are on the coast. And vice versa. In a coastal region where people don't have as much stone, I mean precious stones, you get a lot of stones which is less value, but beautiful, colorful stone can be found only in mountains. So there were like cross-pollination, it was different currencies. And you can exchange shells for stone or for precious stones. Again, because there's no records, it's all theories, because we can find large piles of shells in burial places, burial place, when people are buried after end of the life. And logically to suppose that they will not be getting, they will try to take something valuable with them while departing on the other side. There are, like, as I said, it will take more than we have time just to get through all the stages. But the major thing about the wealth is that it can be stored and protected. And here governments come, because to protect your wealth, you need to have either people with guns around, or these arrowheads around you, or you have to have police or central government who control. However, again, that's not necessarily all the societies in the world work like that. When there is a central government, but the wealth tend to grow in a more protected and more secured state, or in a state where there is no much war going on. That's actually one of the secrets of small states. Say, for example, Morocco, Monte Carlo, or Andorra, or San Marino. It's a small, very small kingdoms, or actually they all monarchies in the center or in outskirts of Europe. And there are a lot of wealthy people, because their states, the small microstates, managed to survive at least last 3 centuries of war in Europe, because they were not attacked by allies, even during World War II, when Switzerland was still the neutral state. Amazingly enough, around all of this apocalyptic war of World War II, when there were more than 100 million people exterminated, Switzerland managed to keep in neutrality. And only the reason they were managed to do that because of the wealth from both Nazis and other wealthy families who flew in Switzerland, Swiss banks. And no one in their right mind, even Hitler himself, was not able to attack Switzerland because of that. That's a power of big money. That's a power of the possession.
But you talk about this, right? Because for people to migrate, let's say Switzerland during the World War II, they just bring the cash with them and they go there, or they do wire transfer.
Different ways. Right? One of the ways most at that time we did not have, of course, SWIFT or PayPal or any of pretty convenient for us now monetary way. Technologies allow us to transfer money from one place to another. But at that time, people widely use banking transaction as well. At that time, banking transaction can be done two ways. One of the Western way to do transactions when you have two banks on a different side of the continent, where one bank can move money from one account, can move your record in that bank from one account to another, in your wealth also, but your wealth is held in a central bank, in a central, say, like underground place. So for example, Central Bank of England is famous for having very deep
vault, basically.
More than several vaults underneath them. And Bank of New York or Federal Reserve System is also famous for that, keeping money in the center of New York. There, by the way, a lot of foreign gold was kept during World War II, which then the United States did not return back to Europe. So still United States technically hold the most of the gold in the world, because gold belonging to Spain, to France, to other European countries still sits in a New York safe. New York vaults under the New York streets.
It's still there?
It's still there, yes. But of course, on the legal side, it still belongs to that country, and no one in their right.
But back in World War II, right? Because the rest of the world is basically like the end of the world, basically.
No.
So for these people, when they move the money to Switzerland, do they actually bring those gold, their assets, to them physically?
That's what that's what I'm trying to get to. So two ways, right? Yeah. First is not physically, but move from account to account. But because of the war, many people start to do it physically during the World War II, because even famously, that there is still hunt going on for the so-called Hitler's gold, because it's magically disappeared, and no one knows where most of the Third Reich gold is still unaccounted for. And where it is, no one knows. That's why many people still searching in Europe for the golden train, which is supposed to contain most of the Third Reich gold. There are many theories about that, including that Hitler was able to escape to somewhere to South America, and took most of the gold in a submarine, or go into the islands, or even go to the Antarctica. There's many different theories about that. Some of them crazier than others. To answer the question, at the period preceding the electronic transfer, if you want to move your wealth from one place to another, there were almost no other means than to do it physically, especially if it is gold. If it is money, there were still the way to do that. For example, you can give money to someone you know, and someone on other country give the same amount to someone he knows. So that way you have distant transactions, but only so you have money moving from one record to another record in the books, but physical movement is limited to you giving money to people sitting on the other side of the table. And it used to be very, very popular in Muslim states. This way to introduction is still popular in a Muslim state. They got special, there is Islamic finance, and there is a lot of law in Islamic codex which tackle that, and it's different from what we have in the West. At that time back then, it was also one of the most popular way to trade. But again, it will not help you when you try to escape the war zone, obviously, right? Yeah, because giving money to someone else who are also in the war zone probably, well, depends actually. Maybe this one got a bigger wallet, or more people with muscles, which can safeguard that goal.
I imagine during the war times, you'll have to carry the cash or the gold like physically, and like since they're billionaires, they probably have like a large like case whatsoever, or they have their other methods to take them to the other country, to Switzerland, basically. And it also relates back to the original question I have over here, and we talk about how ancient people in the cave, they're trying to store their wealth using like the arrowheads or like the shells, the ancient currency, basically. The money itself being so physical and hard to carry is somehow like a characteristics like throughout the history, right? And so for those ancient people, when they're trying to go to a new region, like what is the main reason for them doing that? Even like they having to endure the inconvenience of carrying such a heavy asset from one place to another.
So you mean why people was moving during the Mongolian conquest of the most of the Western and Asian continent? They were, of course, moved because of the threat for their lives. So for most of the time, the reason for people to live where they live is just leave the place where there is their home. Was, of course, the someone invading their home and trying to kill them and their relatives. That's the main reason.
Okay.
Of course. And they even say that the history is the history of the war. But that also might be only because all the records we have left is records of the war. So it might be also a different view on this. But of course, additional reason is that not only the wars threaten people with money. There are so much famous stories about kings and queens trying to use their vassals or their subordinates, their dukes, their less ability votes or money to finance their own needs, say for the war or for the luxury. And the most famous, of course, the Knights of Templar Knights, or Templar Knights.
What's that story about?
Oh, the Templar Knights. It's a story about the ancient Templar order, which was founded back before or during the Crusades. To safeguard people, or to help people to move from Europe to Holy Land. That story began in 1093 when first Crusades come from Europe. Still not 1093, a little bit earlier. They come by the Bernard Clairvaux. Bernard Clairvaux was very clever in bringing together about 20,000 or people, very heavy armed, the cavalry and knights, and inspiring them with this religious missionary ideas. And all these knights, all these, like at that time, 20,000 people with heavy armored cavalry was probably the biggest ever army gathered in Europe, and they all moved across across first or by the sea, and then across the channel to first they of course conquered the Constantinople and then moved further. Very bloody history, and that's when these crusades began. And then there was more than 14 crusades, if I'm not mistaken, or 13, and it lasted almost 200 years, that history. And during that time, there were always people with money moving from Europe to Holy Land. It's not necessarily you go there to kill other people. It's also just to make a trade or visit your relatives. And visiting at that time was very, very dangerous business. It's not like today you can buy them Thomas Cook check and then go there and not risking anyone robbing you. At that time, if you want to go, you have to take all the possession, including wealth, with you. So the person traveling from Europe, say to Jerusalem, must carry all his or her gold with her or him. And that's where Templars Knights come to the picture. The first, it was an order which was established, they later started to be residual in Malta, but at that time there were, as other knights, they were inspired by the idea of conquering lands from the Muslims, right? So they went there, but then they suddenly understand there was a big business in this. And as all monastery orders, they were held by very, very strict discipline. On top of that, they're extremely well trained. And that's the best people to take as your bodyguard. So people who moved from Europe to Holy Land started hiring them just to guard the gold. And then suddenly these knights, smartest of them, realized that why we carrying the gold back and forth? Why don't we open a bank? And then all they need to do is just go some European city and give money to Templar Knights of the Temple, and then that gold will be deposited in their boxes in, say, in Malta or other castles. And then when you go to Jerusalem, you just got that money from another knights who will give you the equivalent sum based on some receipts. That's it. So that's one of the first banking. Well, not the first, but it was banking transactions that there. So banks of Templar Knights become extremely wealthy. One of the wealthiest monastic order known in history. And then back in, I don't exactly remember the year, but it was 14th century, or sorry, it was 13th century. It was probably 1237. Don't take me accountable for that. When I think it was Philippe, one of there were many French kings at that time. One of them were not very good with his finance, so he became bankrupt. He needs money, so he said, "Oh, okay, we got who from my subjects are the wealthiest?" And then he saw these Templar Knights and said, "Very well, now we got a confiscation." But at that time, confiscation was not possible, so he accused them to be heretics. And it ended very bad for Knight of Templars. The royal guard came and took over them, and they did not resist it. Absolutely not resisted. And they were then burned.
Really?
Yeah, all the high top echelon of Temple Knights were burned on a stake because they were heretics. At that time, that was how people dealt with heretics. And then Philip just took the money.
Oh wow.
That's how dangerous to be wealthy, my friend. You're gonna be watched. You're gonna be watched.
They burn them alive and just take the money?
They burn life to, well, of course, it's all, there is no like a court decision to do that. So we don't have proven record that it was exactly because of that. But the prevailingly overwhelming theory about why it happened is because the king need money.
And it's also interesting, like, how does the king have the power to do that? Considering the people who have the money is like on the other side, right? Like,
that's
how are you going to pay your soldiers if you don't have the money? Right?
That's actually good. That's a very good question, because that's all about the power of state. Because technically saying on military prowess and political prowess of the Knight of Templar was overwhelming. That was order spread all the European countries, but they were resided. Their high echelons was resided in France. So, and there at that time the mentality of the people was like, there is a god and there is a king after him. So king's power is a god's power. So if the king sends you their guards, you have to obey. And that's how Maltese Knights of the Templar just didn't even resist, didn't even try to resist. Although I think that there is little doubt that if they resist, that then king would have much difficult time just to overtake that order, because there were more than, I don't remember exactly how many of them, but it was 10 of thousands of knights. There were there were ten of thousands of knights, including their subordinates, because number of knights actually was smaller than 10,000. It's like you got they always were officers. They were high positioned, but there are a lot of in their military order, other people were subordinate to them. So one knight can have dozens of people who support him on the battlefield. So that's why altogether they formed pretty powerful army. But again, it was happened more than 300 years after, actually it was probably 300 years after the founding of the order of the Templars. And that's why they are already probably was a little lazy, or I don't know, politics. But of course now it's all different. Not so much actually.
Yeah, but like, why does the knight, like, is it because of the original belief of there's only one God and one king that drives them to follow the king instead of working for the money from the rich people?
Well, I said it's a good question, because why people which are extremely powerful, they still obey the state. Say, for example, now we do have very powerful people with a lot of money, richest people in fact in the world, which are still obeying governments, although they cannot do that. For example, moving to another country, or just disregarding law and just hiring more lawyers, but almost overwhelmingly, rich people follow the law. And that's because, of course, there is a harsh punishment, and there is, of course, because there is no place to go. All the world is covered by the political state, right? So it's not like there is a place in the world where there is a place for rich people to go and have their own rich people government. It doesn't exist. Although there are so many attempts, there used to be, and there are so many attempts to do that. For example, these small kingdoms, as I mentioned, Monaco, trying to attract as many rich people, but still, they do have a king on top of that, or Luxembourg. But Luxembourg is probably not the best example, because Luxembourg is actually very, they do have very good industries, strangely enough. So they're not only relying on the banking.
Is that the same reason why Cayman Islands is like the place where a lot of people just go there? And
yes, it is. There are small states, especially after the beginning of the Cold War, when there were that strange situation when there are two powers opposing to each other, and all these micro states start to be refuge for people parking their money and using their status to lower the taxes and to attract more and more people with money because at that time two powers were playing against each other also on economic fronts, not only on the military or ideological. So there were many people trying to make a business between two countries. Yes.
I see. But why? So, because you just mentioned another thing, right? You said during the World War II, the people who went to Switzerland is the reason why even Hitler won't dare to attack Switzerland. So that tells me basically that the rich people still have some like negotiating power towards the government, right? So is there a balance?
Well, that's one of the most contested topic. I think so many people believe in this plutocratic government which envelop all the world. For example, world government headed by the Vices of Solomon or by World Bank, which consists of the richest people who govern everything. Those theories is not new. They have been through all the history, and they're all any type. Even if you look at the legends, who are king of the mountain? Who is usually the king of the mountain?
As in, like, who's the
in any legend?
In a legend,
yeah,
the king of the mountain.
Yeah, who's sitting on top of inside of the mountain and guarding their gold?
The dragon.
The dragon, or the black magician. It's never like white magician who wanna render the good to the world sitting in the mountain on the top of the gold. So all people already subconsciously, from even ancestral memory, gives them that negative connotation to having a lot of money. Almost in all the, well, not almost, any tale, any legend, you will be pressed to find a good billionaire or good positively, except some figures, for example, Solomon, famously very rich, very famous, and at the same time, very fair, right? Or the 1001 Night. That's about Persia, about Baghdad in 1001 Night is a collection of different tales from the time of the 800 AC. It's when the Arab Caliphate was on its top in Persia, in present-day Iraq, Baghdad. And the governor of Baghdad, in their tales, presented as very, very generous and very, very wise gentleman. Although he was also, okay, I don't want to talk more about 1001 Night, but there were bad side of that gentleman as well. Because the lady who was telling that was trying to avoid to be basically
But the main
persecuted.
thing is people just don't think rich people are good.
Yeah,
basically,
so,
that's
yeah.
the
Right, it's always the
That's
black.
what I'm trying to get to.
The dragon, basically.
Yeah, so dragons and everything and all of that. So rich people bad, and just get rid of them. And then, of course, you know the story. And right now, it's pretty much continuous. If you're rich, you are looked at from different sides, and that's
so it's hard for them to gain the same amount of power to have people to like believe in them and work for them to fight with the government, right? Because I assume like even though like in German under Hitler's rule, like most people believing like Hitler are actually just working class people, right? They really believe in Hitler, and that's part of the reason they won't work for the rich people, even though they have money,
that's
right?
all the story which involves money are very complicated. It's very controversial stories, and you need to be very accurate when you comment on them. So that's because even if you know some facts, as I do, about that story, as an economist who is interested in history, I was reading several books about that, but I'm not sure I know all the facts. And there are facts which still not widely available to the public. Hitler still have, at the time, many businesses who were cooperating, producing good for Hitler was also making international business, famously BASF, the chemical company who was producing the chemicals for use in the concentration camps. Widely known fact. Or Hugo Boss, who was a designer of all these famous Hitler fascist outfits. And of course, Mercedes. All Mercedes all across all movies, and they move in SS, Luftwaffe, or from one place. Obviously, that needs financing. All of that is again international transaction. All this company was supplied by not only within the Germany, although of course there was embargo and everything, but there are a lot of countries which was able to avoid that. So Hitler was still able to get all the needed material. Only after he was completely surrounded and Allied forces started attacking him from different sides, he started to experience so much difficulties on the economic side. First of all, because there were not oil, but again, when Hitler started the war, he realized he and his advisors, especially on the economic side, and understood that they need still to keep good financial relationship with the West, because the transaction will be going on back and forth even during the war. Look, for example, what's going on now in the Ukrainian-Russian war or Russian-Ukrainian war. Same thing. Transactions are going back and forth despite all the sanctions. That's what basically happened always in human history, because business interests very, very often prevail. Always, because people need to, on both sides, they need to supply, they need to eat, they need to cover their basic goods. And when you don't have, and there is even famous episodes, especially during Italian Civil War, when people start to trade across the front line, just because you literally people who are responsible for supplying their regiments for both sides, they just trade between each other just to have goods going back and forth.
You know what's interesting? Because during like I think around last year, when the war is like very like big last year between Russia and Ukraine, I went on Google Trends and I searched exactly like what is the top trending word in both Ukraine and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I think it's, the European Cup, the football or soccer, what you guys call it, is like playing.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides are actually the top searching word is football.
Football.
So they're watching the game, even though the war is going on, but
War
they're
is
still
going on,
like
yes.
just going for the game. So yeah,
Well, it's a kind of trading the visual
Similar,
and then
yeah.
probably commenting on that also count to that. But getting back to the wealth, it is probably one of the most studied subject in all the economic schools. Everyone interested that. Every single one per person, when he started in school, he asked, why I'm not wealthy? Why the other people are wealthy? And then next question, what is a wealth? And then we get to the subject to the money and all of that. But paradoxically enough, we still don't have an answer to that question. Why some people manage to accumulate so much wealth at the end of their life and others got practically nothing, absolutely. And almost all, executive, all the social or economic theories, social economic theories like Marxism or say Adam Smith or Alfred Marshall or James Pigou or the latest monitor, New Keynesians, or Friedman, all of them were talking about one subject predominantly: how to make the distributions and goods of services most equal, not most equal, but the most reasonable and fair way, the way to keep the society in a stable situation. Because when you have such a big dispersion of income as we have right now, or Gini coefficient is just over the roof, then of course the social tension becoming so high that people just revolt, right? That's what people on top and people on below don't want to have on both sides. So that question of the wealth underpin almost all the other questions. So why some people need to work for life, other people just don't move a muscle and have everything. So that's very, very, very contentious topic.